Now live streaming. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is the Combined Ed Policy and Directions and Operation Policy and Planning Committee meeting. My name is Trustee Mabobi, and I'll be chairing the Ed Policy portion of today's meeting. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. First up, the approval of the agenda. Would someone like to move for the approval of the agenda? That's moved by Trustee Duncan. Or is that, sorry, is that a hand?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, if I might.
Please.
I just wanted to clarify for folks that we're approving the combined agenda, and just in case there was any confusion about that. So we're approving not just the Ed Policy agenda, but also the Operations Policy and Planning agenda all at once.
Thank you so much for clarifying. Would someone like to move to approve the combined agenda? I see Trustee Kwan and seconded by Trustee Gagnon. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is unanimous. At B1, we have approval of the minutes of the November 6th Ed Policy and Directions Committee meeting. And can I get a mover for that? I see Trustee McNally, and I don't believe we need a seconder for that. Is there any discussion? I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Up next at C, we have presentations to the committee. First and foremost, I'm just seeing who all is here. I've got 2 pages going through everybody. I'd like to pass it over to Ginger McStravick and Tara McDonald for their presentation.
Hi, everyone.
I'm not seeing, oh, sorry. Oh, hi, Tara. There you are.
I'm here. Ginger couldn't make it, unfortunately. So I'll just speak on behalf of both of us. Okay. My name's Tara McDonald. I'm a grade 2-3 teacher at Vic West Elementary. And I wanted to, first of all, thank you for allowing me to speak. And also a big thank you to Natalie and Nicole, who took the time to visit our classrooms at Vic West and hear what we had to say. That was so appreciated. So thank you. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I wanted to share tonight and why. And I kept coming back to this meeting that we had as a staff where someone wondered aloud whether people know outside of the school how challenging things are right now, and whether we had a duty to share some of what we're seeing in the hopes that it will make clear that the public education system is not meeting the needs of our students at the moment. And I wanted to start by being clear that I'm not here to blame anyone or accuse anyone, but just to kind of give my perspective. And actually, on the contrary, everyone that I work with, everyone I've spoken to, have been amazing at supporting one another and trying to problem solve using the resources that we currently have. And I'm also not even really here to talk about my own personal experiences, although I could talk for hours about being physically threatened or attacked on an almost daily basis, my EAs being attacked, how my students are proficient at safely evacuating my classroom when a child becomes elevated or violent, how I have students telling me about an incident on the playground and that there was no adult that they could go to for help, how I am exhausted from trying to design alternate programming for students, which I then can't implement because I don't have enough adults in my room to support. And how I have families telling me that their children don't want to come to school because they feel unsafe and overwhelmed, and how I go home each night and wake up each morning just saying, I'm doing the best I can with the resources that I have. And I don't think those resources are enough, but I also know that my particular classroom is kind of a perfect storm that couldn't have been planned for. We had new undesignated students arrive who have extremely high needs. And so if I was the only one struggling, I wouldn't be here speaking to you. I would just keep waking up each morning, doing the best I can with what I've got. But this isn't just about my personal experience. What worries me is the conversations that we have as a staff, where we have experienced teachers talking about going home crying at night because they can't meet their students' needs, and experienced teachers talking about leaving the profession. We have conversations about whether we can safely run a school with so many unreplaced EAs, learning support covering EA breaks, or dealing with behaviors so that the learning support is not getting to the children that need it. That even once students are assessed and designated, they're still not getting the support that they need. And conversations about how we might make it through today because we have some students absent, which I just don't think is good enough. And I know that we're really good at just making do and doing the best we can with what we have, but I actually don't think that's good enough anymore, and that we need to start being a little bit more open about what's going on. And that at the moment, this is not an inclusive model of education that we have. And in fact, it's acting as the opposite when the support is not there for our students to be successful or even physically and emotionally safe in a lot of cases. It's not meeting the needs of our children right now. And I feel like I do a disservice to my students, their families, and my neighbors by not saying anything, because I'm also a parent in the community. My children will go to this school, and I sometimes have panic attacks thinking about my children being in the situations that I've seen this year. And so I don't know all the answers. I suspect that probably a good starting point is better incentives for EAs so that they want to stay in the profession, and probably more funding for counselors and behavior support and other support staff. But I don't know the answer to that. And I know it's not straightforward. I'm just here because I don't just want to sit around and complain about how challenging things are, but I actually just want to speak up and make sure that people know, and that maybe we can do something to work towards improving it. And so that's all I had to say. I just wanted to conclude by thanking you again for allowing me to speak, for listening to what we have to say, and for everything that you do to support our school system and our students. And hopefully together we can find solutions to help make this the inclusive, high quality education system that all our children deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Tara. I'm wondering if you would feel comfortable taking questions at this point.
Yeah, I can try.
If anyone has, I already see Trustee Kwan's hand. Go ahead, Trustee Kwan.
Not so much a question. I just wanted to say thank you, as you know, many of our staff in our district, you're out there every day. And you're a resource for the students out there. And, I think it goes a long way to just say thank you for, what you're doing out there and what you're doing for our students. And, we're aware, and there definitely needs to be more resources in education. I think everyone around this table tonight, and a lot of people who aren't, definitely agree and are fighting for that. So we'll keep the good fight, and we just want to keep the conversation open and keep going. And we're so happy that you've come and you've chatted with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again so much, Tara, for your presentation. I don't see any other hands unless there are any on the second screen. Oh, go ahead, Jane.
Hi, Tara. I'm the president of QP 947. And so I just wanted to thank you and come and share your story, because I know that it's not a story that's just going to come from your school. And we all need to hope that we can work together to make it a better environment for our students, for our staff, whether they're, GVTA, our partners, or our EAs, our administrative staff in the offices. And we've got lots of work to do. And yeah, thank you for sharing, like I said, that story that could come from many other schools, if not all of them.
I also see your hand, Lena. Go ahead.
I also wanted to thank Tara for coming and sharing this story, because as GVTA executive, we will visit schools to talk to teachers about various things, but this is definitely a very, very common theme, and it's certainly not unique to Vic West or or her own classroom. Yeah, the EEA shortage, just even in regularly filled positions, but then multiplied by failure to fills, is just making it so difficult for teachers. And I run the mentorship program, and our mentor teachers are some of our most seasoned teachers, and they're sharing similar stories of it's just a lot. So hopefully, like Jane said, hopefully we can find a solution soon.
And go ahead, Trustee McNally.
Thank you. Having taught in what was called special ed in this district for 22 years, I just want to say that in my opinion, the situation in many classrooms is far, far beyond any workshops on building capacity in teachers or EAs. They are beyond capacity. So I don't know what the solution is either, but I don't think it's another workshop on building capacity. Our partner groups will let me know if I'm wrong, but that's how I see it.
Thanks everyone for your comments. I'm going to move us along to the next presentation. And that's going to be diversity, equity, and inclusion training for staff. I'll pass it over to you, Matt Christie.
Okay, thanks so much, Emily. And good evening, trustees and everyone else who is joining us. My name is Matt Christie. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the Social Justice Chair for the GVTA. And our ECA has spent some time talking about, even last year, about the sort of training that might be valuable for staff, administrators, for trying to address some of the issues around the increasing rises in anti-LGBTQIA plus hate that's happening, as well as other forms of hate that are occurring in the schools. So I think this is a consideration for our upcoming school budget, and it would be the implementation of comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion in-service training for staff in our district. So I'll use the shortened version DEI for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a great way having this in-service training would be a great way to foster DEI in our district. The timeliness of this proposal cannot be overstated, as our district has unfortunately witnessed a significant surge in incidents involving anti-2S LGBTQIA plus hate, anti-Black, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic hate. Staff and administrators find themselves struggling to address these issues in meaningful ways. It often is leading to unsatisfactory resolutions that at worst can inadvertently condone acts of hate. It's imperative that we equip our educators with the tools and knowledge needed to respond effectively and sensitively to such challenges. Moreover, while our district has made some commendable steps to enhance diversity within our teaching staff, such as our preferential hiring agreements for Indigenous and racialized teachers, there remain unique challenges and barriers hindering the sense of belonging, support, and long-term retention of these educators. We must create a culture that not only attracts but sustains a diverse teaching force, recognizing the invaluable insights that their experiences bring to our district. DEI in-service training has the potential to address these challenges head-on. We must cultivate a culture of inclusion and equity within our district. Employees must feel a sense of belonging, not just in their roles, but within the broader organizational fabric. The benefits of such training are extensive, from raising awareness on workplace diversity issues to empowering employees to stand up against discrimination in effective and meaningful ways. It will also increase engagement, improve retention rates, and promote positive systemic change, and cultivate an inclusive district culture. It is vital that every member of our organization participates, especially those in HR and leadership positions, as they exert significant influence across the organization. So I propose that as a starting point in our district, We could have all administrators and GVTA staff representatives undergo the ICA's, the Intercultural Association's bystander intervention tools for equity training, as this would equip them with skills to address incidents of hate and discrimination that happen in schools. HR could work with the Community Partnership Network to improve community engagement by incorporating an intersectional lens to better ensure feedback from diverse groups in the community. There are some institutions that are already tying professional reviews and job descriptions to successful promotion and implementation of DEI initiatives. So this is a model our district could consider, especially for administrative positions. The underlying philosophy is clear that fostering workplace diversity is everyone's responsibility. So comprehensive DEI training is robust and includes many modules, some of which pertain to specific roles within our district, but each is crucial for fostering a truly inclusive environment. Some of these modules might be things like allyship, unconscious bias, inclusive leadership, inclusive culture, microaggressions, bystander intervention, sexual harassment, anti-racism, or anti-oppressive training. While this list may seem extensive, DEI training is not a mere few hours of video. It needs to be meaningful, directly addressing issues, fostering ongoing conversation, and woven into the fabric of our school system. Diversity training is a linchpin of this strategy, aiming to tackle the root causes of workplace inequalities. Fortunately, in Victoria, we have numerous organizations offering various aspects of these trainings, and I've compiled a list that I can provide for your reference. In conclusion, implementing anti-oppressive in-service training transcends being a response to a global call for DEI. It is an investment in the future of our educational community. By nurturing a culture of inclusivity and understanding, we empower our staff and create an environment that celebrates diversity, equality, and belonging. I urge you to consider this proposal for the betterment of our district. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Matt. Would you like to take questions?
Sure thing. Happy to take some questions.
If anybody has questions or comments, go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, Matt, for being here. Appreciate your time. I wonder if you wouldn't mind just forwarding us on a copy of your recommendations and the list of potential materials that you mentioned in your presentation.
Yes, absolutely. I will do that for sure.
Thanks, Matt.
Excellent. I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to move us forward to item C3 of the agenda, and that's the ESLR memo and presentations, and I'll pass it over to the Deputy Superintendent.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the chair. Through the chair, I'd like to introduce District Principal Sean McCartney and Macaulay Elementary School Principal Joanna Snow and Vice Principal Emmanuel Henry. They're here to give us an overview on the Accessibility Act and the action plan that's coming through that, and tying into the work that Macaulay is doing, including the nonviolent crisis intervention work. I'll turn it over to Principal McCartney, and thank you.
Thank you, Harold, and good evening, everybody. It's been a while since I've seen some of you, actually, so it's nice to be back and share some of the components. It's interesting. I think I'll be touching on some of the common threads that have already surfaced tonight, and some of the aspects of what we are trying to do within, as Tara said, working within the resources we have and the means that we have to tackle some of the difficult and challenging problems that we're facing, while trying to stay positive and proactive. So first of all, I also want to send regrets. My colleague Nadine Naughton was hoping to be here to present tonight, but she's unfortunately not well, so she's unable to join us for tonight's presentation. And most importantly, we want to be handing it over in a few minutes to our colleagues over at Macaulay, who are going to share some stories from one of our priority elements. Wendy, are you going to be sharing slides for me tonight, or am I doing that?
If you send me the presentation, I'll be happy to share it, Sean. I just have the PDF of the agenda right now.
Gotcha.
Or you're welcome to share your slides as well, whichever's easiest.
Let me. Sorry, folks. I went with an assumption and I don't have my slides open and ready, so give me 1 minute. Well, it says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
My apologies. The Okay, try again, please, Sean.
I think. Oh, it's not letting me do that. Here, Andy, I'm going to send it your way.
We know it's live now.
Yeah, I'm still having trying to share. Andy, did that work to share it with you that way?
Yes, I've got it now. Thank you. Let me.
I'll quickly speak then because here, well, look at how fast that worked once I shared it. Okay. The memo, as outlined in the pack-up, provides a bit of an overview for these the slides that we'll be using to speak to tonight. Next slide, please, Andy. As stated in the memo and as shared by colleagues from these Enhancing Student Learning Report updates, the district departments continue to base a lot of our work through these 3 key items or documents. We know that we're guided by that on the far right, the ministry's vision for student success. And then internally, a lot of our work attempts to be as aligned and focused under the strat plan. And many of those pieces of our shared work are highlighted in our Enhancing Student Learning Report. Next slide, please, Andy. Specifically on our district, in our shared work across district departments, and then in our district inclusive learning department, we talk a lot about seeking equity, and we've shared this image in the past. Tonight, hopefully, you'll see and hear some examples about the purposeful work we're trying to do to live through this image. On the far right, with the folks behind the fence, it's really speaking to justice, which is sort of that active work about identifying and actually removing the barriers. So while equality is on the left, as we seek equity and move towards justice, we know it's about pursuing actions that actually identify and remove those barriers. Next slide, please, Andy. Earlier this fall, I believe trustees for sure, and any other folks who've been connected, heard from Superintendent Whitten a little bit about the Accessibility Act implementation. So there's new legislation in our province, and school districts are in the first year of the initial implementation under the Act. So tonight, with accessibility and equity in mind, I wanted to bring a little more of a detailed update specific to the Act implementation. Three key components were shared around what we had to have in place, which pretty much we now have in place. And so there's a feedback mechanism on the website for ongoing feedback for any folks in our broad learning community to identify accessibility issues, barriers. We have established a 12-person accessibility advisory group, which is a rich blend of staff representatives, parents and guardian representatives, as well as student representatives from some of our secondary schools. And we have now, we're about to have our third initial meeting with the Accessibility Advisory Group this fall. And then in the background, we have a staff working group who are responding to the input and feedback that we have so far. And as you'll see on the rest of the slide, more to come. What's great about this act is that the accountability to implement the act comes with a really strong framework, which we believe that's what's referenced in the memo. Both the framework with its intent to establish feedback mechanisms, as well as a multi-year plan that has to be monitored and reviewed with input and feedback ongoing through the Accessibility Advisory Group, is a really strong framework that will help us better achieve some of the barrier reduction we hope to implement. And some of that will come through the next couple of months of work in really surfacing meaningful feedback from a broader representation across the district. So that survey draft, the second bullet, as well as the initial high-level plan in draft are both going to be coming live in January. And obviously, the plan to have the plan is partly going to be informed by the feedback we get in the survey. So stay tuned for that. It's coming out in January, and the rest of this year will be work to collate and summarize the feedback we get from the broader survey and to inform the priorities in the first full accessibility plan that we hope to publish by early this spring, which will then be implemented within that multi-year cycle under the ACT implementation. And this plan will take us through 25-26 school year. And so more to come and share back. But again, it's a really great framework that we've been provided with, which is helping us to be really strategic and purposeful and look at that active process of seeking equity that I referenced in the previous slide. So more to come on that, but we're quite optimistic about the potential that the implementation provides us to actually come up with a strong action plan. Next slide, please, Andy. Oh, was there one before this one? There we go. When we think about that accessibility piece and even student voice, this slide we've used a couple of times, so I'm not sure if trustees or other folks have seen this before. And I'm going to even step back to the earlier presentation. I think when we think about what Tara was speaking to with her experience at Vic West Elementary and our work alongside so many of our schools, especially in the younger years right now, we picture a colorful mess, which is our attempt to keep a positive spin on things. But it's a really challenging time in many of our public systems. Basically, right now, we know that more of our children are exhibiting behaviors that are telling us our school system in its current state is not serving them. And we also believe this is a surface level observation, including the little picture on the slide, of a very complex problem that has deep social roots. Our partner systems in the medical world, in health, in social services, in the justice system, are all experiencing high levels of stress in response to the context that is our current reality. And then next to that messy, colorful slide, image, we also believe, and I believe Tara was referencing this and as well, we believe that there's many things outside of our immediate zone of a control or influence. And so trying to zero in on the things we can be doing and the ways we can be working to maximize the resources we do have and try to stay as positive and proactive as we do some of this difficult work. And really, that's that zone of control. How do we work within this stress system, maximizing the resources we have using an evidence-based approach? Next slide, please, Andy. This is just a brief overview. And again, to some on this call, you will have seen these images. As a department, when we respond to requests from schools, when we're working alongside our colleagues, both proactively and responsively, we're grounded in the ideas and mindsets behind these images. Basically, we know that kids do well if they can. We know that behavior is communication, and that when kids are exhibiting behaviors, they're communicating with us. And the gist of these posters is that we look to see children through the lens of stress detectives. We know that when behavior is communication, we're trying to figure out what they're saying, and what they're saying tends to be things around finding or stressors, unmet needs, and skills deficits. And the work is to find those stressors and reduce them, find the unmet needs and meet them, and find the missing skills and teach them. And that is the ongoing challenge and the hard work that it was being described earlier tonight, and that we're just seeing more and more of in our schools today. So what I'll quickly share before I hand it over to my colleagues at Macaulay is a summary of some of the proactive work we are doing as a department to support. Next slide, please, Andy. And maybe I'll actually go in reverse order and skip down to the last bullet, because I'm looking at Cindy on the side of my screen here. And I know that one of the shifts this year is around a working group, which is a combination of efforts from folks in our department, folks in the HR department, as well as representatives from GVTA and QP, really trying to be purposeful, aligned, and focused on things we can do within that zone of control to continue to look at the implementation of the violence prevention program and ways we can enhance, change, shift, support, and be connected and aligned in that work together. So we're proud of that initial partnership and excited about some of the work to come moving forward. Our nonviolent, I'll go to the top. We continue to offer multiple entry points around professional development, reframing behavior as communication, again, grounded in some of the visuals and the language I just shared on the previous slide. And those are as formal as presentations during professional development days, and as informal as conversations after school with small groups of staff who are interested. And so it's multiple entry points around the same content. And then that middle bullet, which segues nicely to the story Macaulay is going to share tonight, our nonviolent crisis intervention training. As a response to some of the demands and increasing needs we're seeing, we've basically increased our budget operationally within our funds as a department to try to offer more seats, more options for participants in this training, which we know is valuable training, which is a significant increase year over year for the individual offerings. And then in addition to that, in some of our priority elementary schools, Macaulay being one of them, we've added the idea that we would pursue whole staff training, because we know that common language, common skills, common understanding is a part of a proactive strategy on the ground in some of our schools. So with that segue, I'll hand it over to the amazing administrator team at Macaulay to share a bit of what that looks like on the ground at their school.
Thank you very much. We are the admin team at Macaulay. I'm Joanna Snow, and I'm the principal.
And I'm Emmanuel, I'm the vice principal.
And Andy, could you, I hope our slides are embedded within Sean's slides. Oh, perfect. Excellent. So next slide, please, Andy. Thank you. So just a little bit about our school context. We are considered one of our district's priority schools. We're in the heart of Esquimalt Township. We have 505 students, so we're one of the larger schools in elementary schools in the district. We are a dual track school, and we have about 70 staff members, so it's quite a large staff. And our sort of context was, obviously, Tara referenced it, Sean's referenced it. Since COVID, we noticed quite a significant increase in the students' ability to regulate independently, an increase in anxious type behaviors. As Tara very nicely outlined, we have a lot of diversity in our schools, and we're struggling to meet those needs. So we had a bit of a situation happen last year, and it kind of started the conversation for us here at Macaulay.
We've had ongoing all last year, and since I've been here at Macaulay, frequently children who are experiencing and overflowing sort of stressors and are escalated. However, last year we had a child who actually had a crisis, a full-blown crisis, and it was quite worrisome for everyone around. The staff was super eager to help, but so much so that too many people were coming to the situation, which actually escalated the situation. So what we wanted to do instead is think about this kind of like a fire drill idea, is that the NCVI is kind of like a fire drill for us. It helps us establish routines, language, knowing what roles we have. So for example, if we were to have a fire drill today with no one having ever been trained, to have 500 kids exit the building safely would be very, very difficult. But now, because we've trained, we practice all the time, we know what our jobs are, it makes it more efficient and streamlined, and everyone knows their roles. So basically what happened is that now when we have a response team, everyone knows what to do. We have code words, we have limited vocabulary that we're sharing so we don't escalate the students even more. So we're working really as a team to do that.
Yeah, we met as a team in the spring. Our Pro-D committee worked at some of the goals over that we would like to set over the year, and requested that we do some nonviolent crisis intervention training as a whole school. So we reached out to the district team members, and we were able to do the training in September. Next slide, please.
And after our session that we had with Pro-D for the NCVI, I decided to sort of create some posters. So these are the posters I designed to help us all align our vocabulary, our language, and the philosophy behind what we want to do to respond better to a situation and not react to a situation, because responding is more organized, a more thoughtful approach and intentional. So these are visuals that we've had, and I think, Joanna, we have on our keychains for some of them.
On our keychains.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see that. And basically, we have them in our classrooms and we have other spaces so we can share with different staff. And if we have new staff, they have an easy access point too, with some clear visuals. I've also noticed, at least I'm not sure if Joanna has, but that students have also started using the same language, like time and space. I'm flipping my lid. So they're using that common language because we're using it and it's familiar to them, which makes it much easier, especially when children are feeling escalated. They don't have vocabulary to explain the long process of what's happening in their minds. They just need a quick visual or a quick signal with a hand to explain that they're not in that moment right now able to express themselves properly.
Next slide, please, Andy. Thank you. So we're 10 weeks post-training, which gone quickly and slowly at times. And three of the key things that we're focusing on is the 3 Ps: people, place, and programming. So students need to have the relationship with someone in order to feel safe. They need a place. They need to have place within the school. School needs to be a calm, safe place for them. But even within that, they need to have a safe place where they can go, where they can experience their feelings, where it's not in front of all the other students, perhaps, where it's comforting. and programming. We need to look at what learner skills are needed in order for students to be able to manage these really, really big emotions for some of these little ones. Next slide, please. So we've really done a shift in thinking. So these are just a handful of the big ideas that we as a school team have been working on. One of the things that we have come up with is some very specific student support plans for a student, for example, like the student that Emmanuel described last year, who comes with, you know, their cup overflowing sometimes at the beginning of the day. It ensures that we have consistent support for some of our priority students, and that the people connecting with them are people who that student has a relationship with. It helps them feel, both the students and the staff feel supported and safe. I think it was alluded to on or spoken to on one of the slides that Sean had. We really needed to, and we still work to reframe the behavior from, oh, they just won't do it, to they can't do it. If kids can do well, people can do well, they will. You know, nobody comes to school in the morning thinking, I'm just going to be a stick in the mud and I'm not going to do things. Kids want to do well, but for various reasons, they're really struggling. They have a lot on their plates, and they can't do it. And we need to remember that when we're working with some of our priority students. Time and space is a big one. We try not to get into the chase. We try not to get into the over utilizing of verbal language. You know, if they are not producing language, they can't process the language. And that was a big shift for us in school. We like to talk a lot as educators, and we really need to step back from that and remember that there's a lot of communication that can be done non-verbally. We've got a lot of kids who now will just give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down to let us know, you know, where they're at in the sort of flow of what's happening to them. Emmanuel talked about responding versus reacting. So a planned response, acknowledging our tone, our volume, using positive messages. And one of the biggest ones for me, at least, is this tension reduction and the rebuilding and reestablishing that baseline for that student. And sometimes it can be seen as perhaps rewarding. So we might have a student who's had maybe a big outburst. They've had to, as Tara alluded to, maybe the class has had to evacuate. Student has become calm. They come into one of our offices or counseling space, and we play a game or we build with Lego. And in previous years, that might have been seen as, well, now you've just rewarded them for that behavior. But when that lid has been flipped and they're just starting to regain their ability to regulate, it's not the time to get into that teaching of the skills or in that blame for them. They hold a lot of blame already. We see kids feeling very embarrassed. And so that's a time when we want to reduce the stressors, we want to meet their needs, and we want to reestablish their regulation, I would say.
Some of those students, once their labels come back now, we're able to continue a conversation while playing a game.
Yeah.
And they're able to talk us through what was happening. And then we can sort of talk about what steps to do next time, which is really important.
Yeah. Next slide, please, Andy. Hey.
So this is another thing that we're doing that's been proactive for our school, is because we don't have a sensory room. We're working on that, right? And we've got some spaces that we're utilizing as much as possible in our school because we have every nook and cranny being used. We've got trampolines, as you can see. We have these little egg chairs from IKEA under the stairwells, bikes. We have, these are sort of zones that we've created. And also in a lot of classrooms, there's like a little tent or a little sort of box, like a cardboard box for like a den sort of feeling for some children. We also have like other sort of tools that they can use to help regulate as well. So this goes, it's all encompassing. We're trying to do the holistic approach.
Next slide, please. Thanks, Andy. So our next steps, I mean, this is an ongoing process and we are continuing to learn at all times, and we learn from each situation that we deal with daily. We are continuing to highlight common language. We do that at Pro D Days. Our most recent Pro D Day, we had be a sensory detective session where a lot of it aligned with the nonviolent crisis intervention training. We talk about it at staff meetings. We revise, as I said, our responses to student behavior. We're constantly trying to tweak that. What could we do better? You know, how can we adjust our plans so that we have people with relationship responding?
Is it the place or is the program always reevaluating and revising?
I talked about the Pro D. We are looking at dedicating funds from our school budget, you know, to support students who might need additional tools and resources. Those egg chairs, this silent bikes, those were started a long time ago with one of our administrators, Mel Postal, started getting us in line with those. And we continue with the district partnership. We reach out to the team and we often are asking for additional inputs, supports. And that might be debriefing, that might be completing some kinds of assessments. We continue to collaborate with community agencies to best support our students. We have access to Shoreline Health Hub, which has been an absolute game changer for some of the schools in the Esquimalt family, where parents are getting connected with pediatricians. And you know, these are students with lots on their plate, and we just really want them to be successful. They want to be successful, and we continue to work with families and community to try and make sure that they can be as successful as possible. So that's our slides.
Thank you.
And I'll just quickly close with this slide, and at the end of the day, I think what you can hear through every presenter tonight, really, we know that even though the work is hard, we still stay focused on every kiddo with that lens of curiosity and potential and strength and passion, because those are the kiddos we have. Even on some days when they're telling us they're having a rough time, all of our kiddos are full of potential, and that's the guiding light that we all have and why we come to work every day. Thanks, everyone. And I imagine, though it's a busy combined agenda, there will be some questions.
All right, I see a few hands up already. Nissa, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm a representative from the Victoria Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils. As something I was looking at when you were creating those safe spaces around the school, obviously that takes resources, but could be considered something that is part of school infrastructure. Is it something that PACs can potentially contribute to as something that supports classroom and curriculum activities, or is it are there considerations around safety or contributing to something that is school infrastructure that would be a concern that PACs couldn't contribute to?
I'm happy to share I don't have the expert answer. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we do have support from our PAC. So for example, one of the things we want to put in place is an outdoor circuit so that we can take students outside when they might need to do some movement with an adult, obviously, or at recess and lunch. And they are helping to support us financially in that. We definitely take any PAC input proudly and happily. So I think it's a potential, yes.
So something that, like, if a school identified that we need some of these quiet bikes or little bouncy trampolines or pillows and things like that, that would, like, as long as the school identified what the need was, so it works with what you have space for, and you don't get a whole lot of things that come your way and you're like, well, this is great, but that's not the direction we need to be. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
And I also see Lena's hand. Go ahead.
Hi.
Thank you for that presentation. The GVTA is obviously understands and is really supportive of this CPI training. One of the things we have been in conversations with at JCCI and just with the district is some of the costs, because the trainer fees and the training resources this year have come from teachers' professional development funds. So our teachers in Victoria only are able to participate in one funded professional development activity per year. And for many of them, those fees came from there, and that precluded them from being able to take part in other professional development that's meant to grow their practice, do professional learning, expand curriculum in their classroom, or educational philosophies. CPI is training. And so we really want to find a way to a better funding model, because where they didn't use their Pro-D funds, they actually used their own finances. And that's a problem. So I think that we need to find a way to support this very worthy training, but not have it impact teachers' professional development or having them pay for it.
I can't speak for other schools or anything, but we actually paid for the entire staff to have the training through our school budget.
Okay. That's interesting. It wasn't the same at every school, and I'm not sure about Macaulay, but some of the costs, the trainer fees, do come from those fees that are paid for by teachers or professional development.
Trustee Kwan, I see your hand as well. Would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I was actually just wanting to know a little bit more about the specific Pro-D training. You know, it doesn't have to be tonight, but I was wondering if someone could follow up perhaps with the training and maybe even the cost associated with it, just so that we have an idea of what that looks like and what's being kind of laid out to do this training. It sounds like it's a pretty great opportunity. So I just wanted a little more information on that, if I may.
Yeah, we can take that away and bring something back for trustees for sure.
Lena, I still see that your hand is up. Did you have more, or?
No, sorry, I'm just on a delay over here.
Oh, no worries at all. I also saw your hand, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, just briefly, I also wanted some information about the funds available and how those are allocated, but perhaps that's something we can look at through the budget process. And but also just wanted to say thank you for all the work and such great work. I know that we've had really positive feedback about the NVCI training, and I'm really happy to see a significant increase in the number of folks that can participate this year in that training. Clearly, it has a huge amount of value. And yeah, just want to say thank you for always striving to, you know, expand and develop your own practice and approaching the students with such a great deal of care and empathy. Yeah, we wish you well as you continue to work as a team. So thanks.
And lastly, I see Nissa's hand one more time. Go for it.
Really quickly, I really love the keychain idea and the posters that your school had developed. Is this something that as rollouts and opportunities for training are made available as funding is available? Are those things that can be used before receiving the training, or are they better used when staff have had formal training in this so that they're implemented correctly, or is it something that other schools could take and start to normalize the language and take some of those lessons learned in preparation for training if they're experiencing, well, I'm assuming across the district it's an issue is there a way that those materials can be made available, or is it better to wait till after schools have had training as a whole and made that commitment as a school community to prioritize that?
Yeah.
Me? Yeah, okay. I think it can be shown first, but I think it's better probably after you've done the course, because it really synthesizes what you've learned. I feel like it really narrows down the thoughts and the key points, the big takeaways from the course that we did. And it's if you took it before, you would see it, it'd be like, oh, that's great, but you wouldn't really know how to implement it or how effective you can make it, because it's more about the context and the story that goes with it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation this evening. I'd like to move us along to section D of the agenda, new business, and I'll pass it over to the Associate Superintendent for the policy 6163.1 learning resources.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, you have the revised updated draft policy in your packet. The changes have been incorporated that have been received through our feedback process are highlighted in yellow for you. I'm happy to walk through those changes if people wish, and then take questions at the end. And if I do have a recommended motion, if the trustees are happy with where our policy is at the end, but we'll wait till we get there. I just want to share that feedback was sought from our community, and we did receive feedback from VCPAC, the GVTA, and even more specifically, the Greater Victoria Teacher Librarian Association provided some detailed feedback for us, as well as trustees in our last meeting when we looked at the first policy draft. So if you're okay, Chair, I'll just walk through the changes. Does that seem?
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Great. So the first one in yellow is just changing the language from provincial list of recommended resources to the actual organization that we can seek to get these from, which is the Education Resource Acquisition Consortium, or ERAC as it's referred to. And so in the ministry's policy for learning resources, it says boards may choose to use the services of ERAC to assist them in choosing or approving learning resources. ERAC maintains a collection of evaluated K-12 resources in the BC school system. So it's just being a little more specific to where we would go as opposed to just a recommended list. So that was the first recommended change that came. The second one on the second page is from our last meeting, where it was asked that we are specific in that there should be no charge for learning resources. So there's a line item here. It's in our policy at the beginning as well, but it says the district believes learning resources should be available without charge. So that's clearly laid out there. And I'll keep going unless I see questions. Or 3.6 was where we were seeking to partner with elders, knowledge keepers, community members to ensure that Indigenous ways of knowing and being are responsibly and reflectively integrated. And the feedback was to be actually more specific and say, and where appropriate, reflected in learning resources. So in other words, you could have read that, one group read that as maybe just have an elder come in and speak and share orally, but they actually would like to see it integrated in the learning resources that are in our schools or our libraries or our classrooms. 37.1. Oh, and the numbering here has changed slightly. Trustee Kwan last time asked for the numbering to be a little bit more, so it didn't go up to like 307. So thank you. So I think that I couldn't highlight all the numbers, but I believe that incorporates that throughout the document. 371, just rationale for learning resource selection. Priority is given to Canadian or local content, as opposed to always buying from maybe another country or somewhere else. That we want to look at supporting Canadian and local content. 372, this is a section that received a tremendous amount of positive feedback. That this section was in place in regards to referring to the BC Human Rights Code around race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, as well as reflect Indigenous, Black, and people of color voices, to be diverse and inclusive. So there's lots of positivity in this one from almost all the groups. At the very end, though, it says, ensure that the resources are current and do not contain offensive or stereotypical content. And that was the end. And the feedback here was that, except as needed to support learning about the effects of such damaging content. So examples may be the internment of Japanese Canadians or residential schools. There may be a time where it is important to actually have some content that is going to help students learn. So that was that suggestion to be added. 374 is a point about moving away from a single resource. The idea that many of us maybe are a little bit older went to school, that every class had one resource and you carried that book around with you, that we're going to use multifaceted approach. You're going to use lots of different resources or sections from different resources. It said multimedia before, and it was some feedback that focused maybe just too much on digital, or so multifaceted was a suggestion for a change, and sources instead of packages. I don't think it changes the flavor of that one at all, just the wording that was in 374. On the next page, on 3.8, the criteria for the selection of learning resources, there was a question around the out-of-date resources that are no longer accurate. So some feedback to ensure that we had up-to-date and accurate resources. So relevance and accuracy were added to the criteria for selecting a learning resource. And then down below at 394, it was just the feedback to add digital resources to our list of types of resources to ensure that would be more clear. It could include websites and that sort of thing that were not included before in the policy itself. So that was the feedback that came and how that was incorporated into the policy as it stands. And I'm happy to take questions or help clarify anything that people are wondering.
Awesome. Thank you so much for walking us through the changes. I already see Lena's hand. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much I see a number of our requests in there, but in the rationale, should it not read focused education resources rather than the ERAC? Because the new name is now focused education resources.
Thank you. You are correct. Thank you very much. I will change that.
Thanks.
I also see Jeff Orm's hand. Go ahead.
I'd like to just congratulate the administration and the board for tackling this work. It's long overdue, and it's a great relief to teacher librarians to have this updated from many decades ago. So thanks for taking all that time and for doing such an amazing job at pulling together so many diverse considerations in this work. There's a lot to consider, and as we've all been hearing in the news, it's becoming a much more contentious area, and so it's a great relief to have this in place as teachers and teacher librarians contend with the kinds of challenges that are becoming more and more frequent. I just wanted to quickly ask a question about one part of the draft policy. As I was looking it over and trying to make sure that it addressed all of our needs as well as it could, I was looking at other school districts' policies, and I noticed there was a similarity with parts of Saanich and parts of Sauk's and other districts as well. And in Saanich's policy, for instance, just prior to the reference that is included in this draft policy at 393 about the superintendent and principal having statutory authority for the school's instructional program and exercising a veto, there was reference in the Saanich policy to the role that a committee structure would play in reviewing challenges, and I just wondered what the thinking was about the inclusion or the decision not to include the role of a committee within the policy. I know that there's a regulation that's going to continue this work and refine it further. I just thought because Sanj had made the choice to include a reference to the committee structure as well in the policy, whether there was something in particular that led our district away from that to be included in this policy. Thanks.
Thank you. And through the chair, yeah, we do have an updated regulation that will follow this policy once the policy is finalized and approved, and that will have a very clear process and a structure, a committee structure for looking at books challenges, for lack of a better term. So anticipate that coming as the next step that will follow.
Thank you very much. I also see Trustee Duncan's hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thanks very much for all the feedback and the work to further develop the policy. And, you know, it's really grown from the first iteration, and I appreciate all the work that went into that. I too noticed as I read through the draft policy, the use of this sort of veto idea rather than a review committee that would be representative of various, you know, expertise and perspectives, both to review the material, but also to address concerns that might arise. So I think that we certainly would want to, or at least in my view, would want to address that very clearly and specifically in the policy, not just in the regulation, because right now, as it reads, the board is delegating authority, its authority, and then on top of it, we're concentrating decision-making with just a couple of individuals. And I don't know if that really is the most effective way of addressing those needs and those decisions. So I don't know if we can really address making those changes on the fly and in the committee. It might be something that really we need to develop again in consultation with relevant members of staff, potentially maybe through one more iteration and a little maybe more work, potentially, for instance, at policy subcommittee. So I'll wait to hear what my colleagues and other folks here tonight have to say, and then potentially move a motion for consideration. Thanks.
Thanks, Trustee Duncan. Go ahead, Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. And a lot of what I wanted to say has already been addressed by my colleagues and by Jeff and Lena. I have to say, some of this, and I'm reflecting on some of the reports I've read about similar approaches that have been undertaken in, well, not similar necessarily, but approaches of a similar vein that have been undertaken elsewhere. Ontario was a notable example where some of the guidance about the criteria for evaluation resulted in a lot of confusion and schools emptying their shells of anything more than 10 years old simply because it was more than 10 years old. And so it perhaps the intention is to address this in the regulation, but the criteria as they're expressed right now do give me some concern. With respect to some of the other points, school educational staff, it feels like a redundant statement. I'm not sure who wouldn't be educational staff in a school who would be involved in learning resources. So if there's actual intended positions or something like that, then I think we should be really specific. I personally would really like to lean heavily on our librarians. They do extra training, extra education, specifically to be able to guide teachers on this sort of nature. around this sort of topic, and I really think that we should be deferring to them. Similar concern with the idea of a veto, and the term that popped into my head was teacher autonomy, and I know that there are limits in all regards, but I think that as a blanket statement, that leaves me uncomfortable. I really think that we're going to have to do some fine tuning there. I have to admit, I'm also I found myself wondering in 4.2 about the sensitive nature of approved learning resources. And I found myself really challenged here. Now, and the reason I am, not because I question the professional judgment of the principal or school educational staff, but simply because having it in there immediately flags that if someone's opinion is that something was sensitive and they should have been informed, I feel like we're opening ourselves up to all sorts of problems with that. So there's a number of things that I have some concerns about, and I'll forward my comments through the chair for consideration. But yeah, I don't think that I would be ready to support this one yet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trustee Painter. I'll pass it over to Trustee Kwan.
Okay, I'll be short and sweet. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of the work that's gone into this so far. When you look at where we came from and what we came from, I just want to say this is amazing work that we've gone into so far. I do agree. I think we probably need one more look just through ed policy. I'd be happy to support a motion to that effect. And then just one quick comment that I had about 3.72 and adding that last comment, except as needed to support learning about the effects of such damaging content. I would actually really like to see some kind of reference to 4.2 in there, just to make sure that we're being sensitive to those who might have reactions to the content if it is damaging content. You know as well as I do that we all have good intentions of reading through a full policy, but sometimes we go to a policy directly to find one specific occasion. And so I think it would be worthwhile probably referencing 4.2 in that section as well, just to make sure. Yeah, but I appreciate the work, and I'll let my colleague hopefully bring forward a motion.
Thanks so much, Trustee Kwan. Go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for their comments, and to my colleagues for your comments. Yeah, I think my sense is that we just maybe need one more iteration, maybe at a slightly different venue where we can invite other folks, whether it's like teacher librarian reps, GVTA reps, if folks into a meeting to have more of an informal chat and working session to kind of just put the bells and whistles on the policy and maybe address some of these sort of outstanding points of feedback. So my suggestion is that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, refer draft learning resources policy 6163.1, I think it is, to the policy subcommittee for further development. And because we like to have some timelines for ourselves and further, any recommendations will come to Education Policy and Directions for consideration no later than February 2024. So we'll put a little bit of a timeline, really focus ourselves on it. So let me just go through that again for benefit of staff, because it's coming from the floor. That the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, refer draft learning resources policy 6163.1 to the policy subcommittee for further development. And further, any recommendations will come to Education Policy and Direction Standing Committee for consideration no later than February 2024. So in other words, if we can get here faster, then great. And if not, we'll give ourselves a deadline of February to put the final touches on this.
Awesome. We'll just let staff finish writing that down, I think. And if we're good to go, is there any discussion before we call it to a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. And I guess from there, we will go on to D2, Policy 5145, Police Questioning of Students in Schools. I'll pass it over to Trustee Duncan for the update.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. We just wanted to, or I wanted to come back and just let the committee know that work on the policy is ongoing and that we expect that recommendations will be considered by the policy subcommittee, hopefully before the holiday break, with the goal of bringing recommendations to Ed Policy in January. So just wanted to give an update that the work is ongoing and that we're hoping to have considered it a policy subcommittee and then be prepared to bring recommendations to the January Ed Policy meeting.
Great, thank you so much, Trustee Duncan. Before we move on, were there any last questions around that? All righty. So moving forward, there is no notice of motion and no general announcements. Oh, sorry, I see Trustee Kwan. Go ahead.
I apologize. This kind of came a little bit late for getting it in the agenda, but I would like to make a notice of motion if I may. And that's based on the presentation that we saw earlier. And it would just be that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, direct the board chair to write a letter to the Ministry of Education and Childcare with a request for additional funding for staff to complete DEI training in line with the K-12 Anti-Racism Action Plan.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Trustee Kwan.
Do you want me to read that out one more time for staff? Would that?
I think that would be good. Yeah.
Okay. So that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, direct the board chair to write a letter to the Ministry of Education and Childcare with a request for additional funding for staff to complete DEI training in line with the K-12 Anti-Racism Action Plan.
And if staff could just let me know once we know we have it. Secretary Treasurer.
Trustee Kwan, is there any chance that you could email that to me? I've got most of it, but I think that would be the easiest. Thanks.
Absolutely, I can totally do that.
Excellent. Okay, so given that we are at the end of the Ed Policy portion of the agenda, I'm going to pass it over to Chair Painter for the Operations Policy Planning Committee portion of the agenda.
Chair, as I'm not on the Operations Committee, I'm going to leave the meeting now, and thank you very much for chairing, and thanks to all who spoke and presented tonight.
Good to see you, Trustee McNally. Have a great night.
And as we move into the operations policy and planning portion, it'd be good to just clarify that the trustees who have who will be voting on this are myself, Trustee Gagnon, Trustee Kwan, and the board chair, Trustee Duncan, in her ex officio role. So just like to keep things going. We're going to begin with an approval of the minutes. The recommended motion is that the November 20th, 2023 Operations Policy and Planning Committee meeting minutes be approved. Does anyone have any amendments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is unanimous. I have no presentations to the committee, so we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Policy and Regulation 8400 whistleblower protection. And we have a recommended motion tonight that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, approve the revised policy 8400 whistleblower protection and accept the advised administrative regulation 8400 whistleblower protection. Superintendent, were you going to speak to this one?
Thank you, through the chair. We do have Director of Human Resources, Mr. Knutson, on the call, who has been working on this policy. So if you, Chair, feel it's okay, then we can pass it to Mr. Knutson.
Certainly, by all means, please go ahead, Director Knutson.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thanks very much. Unfortunately, well, we were directed to introduce the whistleblower policy effective December the 1st. The government on the last minute decided to amend the act so that it was very explicitly only to protect employees. And as a result, the use of the trustees, or the inclusion of trustees throughout the policy and the regulations, had to be amended. So you have in front of you the updated policy. The changes are highlighted in yellow, basically removing a reference to trustees throughout the two documents.
Thank you. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just had a couple of questions and a query. So at page 39 of the pack-up at 4.0 reporting, I'm wondering, just as a request, if we could just add the reporting that's envisioned by that section in our board work plan. I just want to make sure we again have a placeholder for that, and especially given some of the change, the change to the act that we're seeing. I'm happy to move that as a motion if need be. And then the other thing I just wanted to address was on page 43 of the pack-up at paragraph 5, referral to designated officer. At 5.1b, it talks about allegations if the allegations concern alleged wrongdoing by the superintendent, then the disclosure should be referred to the office of the ombudsperson. Because the board or trustees are not kind of included in the way that it was originally envisioned, I'm wondering if we want to add and copy to the Board of Education. So that's a suggested amendment, and I'm not sure. So that's at 5.1b. And so it would read, if the allegation concerns alleged wrongdoing by the superintendent, then the disclosure should be referred to the office of the ombudsperson. And I guess really I should ask a question before I move that as a motion. In terms of the process, so if a complaint is referred to the ombudsperson office, is it just a matter of course that the ombudsperson would review the matter and be corresponding directly with the Board of Education about it? What I don't want to see is the board being out of the loop about something as important as that. And if it's not in the policy and we're relying on the ombudsperson's process, then I want to be clear that we understand that their internal process would include notice to the board. So, yeah, thanks. Through the chair to whoever can answer that question.
Go ahead, Director Knutson.
So the amendments that you have in front of you are the amendments that have come directly from BCPC. So it's their document in terms of the wording. You've raised an interesting point, and I don't have an answer. I see nothing contrary to the intent of the act, though, for the board to be advised. But I'm not sure if that would come after the ombudsperson has made some decision on how they're wishing to proceed. If you like, I can certainly go back to BCPC and seek some clarification on that point. Because if it's coming up from the trustees here, one would assume that the other 59 school districts would have a similar question.
I'll come back to you and just, is it a follow-up question, Trustee Duncan? Okay, we'll go with that and then Trustee Kwan.
That's good. Thank you. Yeah, I would appreciate that. I don't want to move an amendment unnecessarily, but equally, obviously in that context, it would be important that the board is aware at the earliest possible stage of a situation like that. And so, yeah, would appreciate if we could get that clarity.
Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, it's a little interesting to me how that was a change kind of almost, it feels like last minute. And I just wondered, and maybe you don't, but I just wondered if there was any any kind of context as to why that change was made at that time. Does anyone have any idea of why it might have happened?
Well, certainly it was last minute. It was the November 27th, right? So
Yeah.
literally days before it's supposed to go live. I think reading into it is the act spoke to directors, and at some point the thought was that trustees are acting as directors. But I think upon reflection, they realized, well, that actually is not the case. But when you think about it, what's the intention of the act? Well, the act is intended to protect whistleblowers, and specifically employees who are whistleblowers. So the ability for the organization to somehow harm or penalize non-employees is very limited, if at all. So I think having the trustees removed actually focus it more pointedly on the group that it is intended to protect, and that is the employees. So.
Follow-up, Trustee Kwan?
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate that. And thank you for your context there, Director Knudsen. I think, my concern here is that, and I do get the fact that this is for employees, but I think there's also some other, other really important pieces that are missing as to, information that should come to the board. And that's kind of where my concern lies. And I mean, I think at this point, I'd be willing to, again, bring a motion to the floor to, that we could bring some objection to the ministry and some of the associations, and hopefully that would bring forward at least a little more clarification. But I plan to do so, but I don't want to do that if there's other questions or comments that come forward. So I will give it a minute to see if anyone else has got anything else to say.
Trustee Duncan, sorry, I was flipping between screens there.
No worries, I've been there. I know how that goes. I just wanted to say thanks to Trustee Kwan for raising those concerns. Perhaps we want to get some clarity about why the changes were made, and maybe some procedural clarity in the form of the clarification that's going to be sought from the Ombudsperson's office. And then, if at that point we think that a letter expressing our concerns would be appropriate, perhaps we could address that at the board meeting.
Trustee Kwan.
Through the chair to Trustee Duncan, I guess, would you want a board motion to direct you to seek clarification?
Through the chair.
I take that affirmative, yes.
Thank you, Chair Painter. Yeah, I mean, I'm at your disposal, so I'm happy to take your direction. I think we can do that informally. I don't think we need I think what I'm hearing from our staff anyways is that they're happy to seek that clarity. I think the changes came at the last minute, and so it's a bit of a curveball. We're trying to catch up and understand the implications. So I think we can do that informally, and then once we get the clarification, then we can decide what, if any, direction you want to give me in terms of writing advocacy letters and the like. But again, through the chair to the superintendent, happy to take direction from the superintendent as well if she would rather see a motion.
Thank you. I feel quite confident that Director Knudsen will be seeking out the questions that were asked and then bring it back to the board, who can then make a decision based on the feedback and the clarity without a motion.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. So with that in mind, Trustee Kwan, did you have a motion?
I do not. I appreciate, thank you everyone for your direction and your advice. And I appreciate that. And I will keep that if it's necessary.
Now is another opportunity. So coming back then, I'm seeing no further hands. So coming back to the original motion that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, approve the revised policy 8400 whistleblower protection and accept revised administrative regulation 8400 whistleblower protection. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much, Director Knudsen. You have a good night.
Thank you. You as well.
Moving on to K, Finance and Legal Affairs, with the K1 monthly financial report for November 2023. And who are we? Secretary Treasurer, or will it be your associate?
I will start off with a summary, and both Julie and I are here to answer any questions that you might have.
Perfect. The floor is yours.
Great. I was just trying to find it on my screen. So we'll start off with the monthly financial report, and you can find the report on page 50 of your agenda package. So November is always an interesting one because our meetings are so early. And so both last year and this year, we had to run the reports prior to month end. So just bear that in mind. There will be some entries that are missing, but the November 2022 numbers are what was presented in the December 2022 ops meeting. And it was run on November 29th, and this year was run on November 30th. So the budget for both of the years will be the preliminary budget plus any changes that have been made since then. And the actuals will be from July 1st to either November 29th or November 30th. If we take a look first at the revenue, so the percentage that's available, that's the amount of revenue that's budgeted and not yet received. When we look at the current year, it's at 63%, and that is exactly the same as where we were at last year, also 63%. And looking at total expenses, the percentage that's available, that's the amount of expense budget that's still available to spend. And so current year, we're looking at 67% compared to 68% last year. So very close in percentages. So the report here is here for your information. That if you have any questions about any of the specific items, feel free to ask.
Thank you very much, Secretary Treasurer. Any questions? Trustee Kwan, followed by Trustee Gagnon.
Yeah, I guess my first question would be just with offshore student tuition fees, which is under revenue. It looks like we've collected actually a lot more to date than we had at this time last year. And I just wondered what reason that might be could it just be timing of receiving payments?
I'm not sure if Julie wants to answer that. I'm not sure what the difference in the FTE was between last year and this year. I believe it is higher this year than it was last year, which would account for part of that increase. As to timing, I think most of it would have been collected by now. And if they're collecting things for future years, you wouldn't see them show up in here. Oh, Julie's got her hands up. So let's just see what she can add to that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Through the chair. Tuition rates were increased by 1,000 per FTE this year. So that would account for part of the increase in revenue. I also know that short-term international programs were a lot higher this year than budgeted. So that would also account for it.
Thank you.
Trustee Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair. My question is a bit of a follow-up question from the October ops meeting. The November ops meeting, where in October we saw $176,000 spent on water. In this month's report on page 53 of the backup on line 561, water's back down to about 46,000. So my question is kind of for the Director of Facilities. If she had mentioned last month that there was a leak that may have been contributing to why we were basically hemorrhaging water. And I was wondering if there was any answer or conclusion to what was causing our water issues in October.
Yeah, in the operations report that I provided, there's been a couple leaks within our district. So we've had a few within district buildings and a few on the sites. They've all been mitigated and dealt with. But we also had a really dry, what do you call it, summer. So we had to water our fields more. So that actually had a little bit to do with it as well. So there's a few things adding to the water increases.
And Associate Secretary Treasurer, did you have a point to add there, please?
I do also know that the energy manager is currently going back and forth with the district of Saanich just about one of the bills because it does seem incredibly high. So he hasn't received confirmation on what it's due to. So we're just waiting on that.
And Trustee Kwan.
Thanks. I actually, hopefully it's a quick question. It's actually 2 line items, and I actually just wondered what was captured under those line items. The first one is, oh gosh, now I'm dating myself because I can't read the line number, but it's exempt staff non-certified. And then the other one is security, and I just wondered what captured under those 2.
Associate Secretary Treasurer.
Thanks. So exempt staff certified are those, I believe, with like teaching certificates. So they would be anyone that was a teacher, then a likely a principal, vice principal, and then are now in the exempt category. And then non-certified are those like me, who's never been an exempt staff member. As for security, Marnie could probably speak more to that one.
I'm chuckling because not really. I'd have to honestly look it up. I'm taking some guesses, so I'll get back to you on that one.
No worries. Thanks to both of you.
Thanks. Okay, seeing no further hands, budget change report. Back to Secretary Treasurer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report starts in your agenda package on page 54. And once again, this report highlights all revenue changes and larger expense changes to the current budget. On the operating fund, we can see that there are 3 new items that have been added at the bottom of the changes amended budget section. The first one is additional ASAI funding, and that's the after school sport and art initiative funding at the James Bay Community School Society. So they got an extra $2,000 to support some students attending their program. Just below that, we had 32,000 in revenues for the cafeterias. And then miscellaneous donations and revenues of about 407,000. Most of that is made up of international education fees. So there was a grant received for the student and mobility exchange of 238,000 in activity fees, and then the remainder in homestay placement and monitoring fees. We had some donations and some funding coming in from the District of Oak Bay as a contribution towards a curtain in the NLC, and some money coming in from Athletics Victoria towards a throws cage. And then a small amount of funding that came in through the Cooper Smith Music Library. So that makes up that 407,000. As to the special purpose and the capital funds, there are no changes on here. Usually we would see interest revenue showing up at least on the capital fund, but it's a month-end entry, and so it hasn't been made yet. So that's why there's no change there. Are there any questions?
Trustee Kwan.
Thanks. Just a quick question. I just noticed under operating contingencies and fund balances at June 30th, 2023. I just noticed, and maybe it was there before, I never noticed before, but was unrestricted operating surplus contingency district pending board approval. And so I wondered, is that still pending, or is that something that we approved and it just hasn't been updated?
It's approved.
Okay, thank you.
Is your hand still up, Trustee Kwan? Do you have another question? Okay. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I just had a question, Chair, through you to the Secretary Treasurer. And again, on page 54, under changes amended budget, there's, and I believe that you may have explained this to us before, so bear with me. I don't think it's sunk in. So under changes amended budget, we've got a reduction, we've got a cost of living, so COLA labor settlement funding under revenue. And then underneath that, it says reduced budget 23-24 surplus appropriation for COLA adjustment. And again, that's under revenue. Would that not be under expense? Like, I guess I'm just wondering why one isn't attributed to revenue and the other to expense, like it is for the management salary increase that we see below.
Through the chair, the COLA, the cost of living allowance, was built into the expense budget. But I don't know if you recall, we hadn't received ministry confirmation of the grant. And so we set it up so that we could balance the budget by using surplus appropriation. So we were using the surplus. So that's just the adjustment on the revenue side between the surplus and the actual revenue that came in. So they happen to be slightly different amounts. So the expense didn't change because we had built that in already. It's just the revenue side that did change. Right, Julie? Yeah.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, just to follow up, if I may. I do recall that. Thanks for the clarification. And so where do we see that surplus appropriation going back into surplus? Where is that? Where does that show up, or does it not really show up in these kinds of reports?
Associate Secretary Treasurer.
Through the chair, so if you look up at the top under budgeted surplus appropriation allocated to expense, you'll see 4.3 million of the surplus. Of that 4.3 million is 2.2 million that we set aside for the COLA. So you'll see the 4.3 million up above, and then we reduce the surplus by the 2.2 million below. Then we add back the revenue. We don't really capture the surplus in this document. There's a lot of things that impact the surplus. We only look at all revenues and then only expenses over 100,000. So you'll get a better idea of where the surplus is when we present the projected surplus deficit.
Trustee Duncan.
Sorry, if I may, Chair, just one more follow-up to make sure that I'm following. So is it correct then to say that the 2.2 million and change that was appropriated from surplus is reflected, is included in the 4.3 and change that is in the report under surplus appropriation allocated to expense, or is it in addition?
Am I okay?
Yeah, please. Sorry, I'm between screens. It's killing me.
So yeah, the true surplus appropriation was 4.3 minus 2.2 million. Does that make sense?
Chair, may I?
Please.
Okay, so the actual true appropriation was 4.3 minus 2.2, and then added back after we got the ministry funding. So we're back up to 4.3.
No. Just,
okay.
No. Just the 4.3 minus the 2.2. So when the projected deficit is presented, I think we're going to do that at one of the first budget committee meetings. You'll see that, we have our starting budgeted surplus appropriation of 4.3, like that's the structural deficit, I guess, amount. And then you'll see that 2.2 million coming off. So it'll reduce the structural deficit by 2.2 million.
Are we good? Clear as mud. Thank you very much for that, Secretary Treasurer, Associate Secretary Treasurer. I'm going to shift gears now, go into facilities planning with the operations update. Director of Facilities, it's all you.
Hi. Just a few items to highlight. We're going to start our yearly lead water testing. So we're underway with testing a third of our schools and throughout the school district. We're also new to another repair is the poor spectrum light standard that seems to keep getting hit. So it's been hit twice this year and it takes out the lights in the parking lot. So we've done a trench now, we're going to reroute the electrical a little bit differently. So if someone else hits that light standard, it won't continue to take the lights out in the parking lot. Reynolds boiler upgrade. We're just working through the deficiency walkthroughs this week, and the Doncaster unit ventilator and DDC upgrade. We're walking through the, for the unit ventilators, we're walking through the last walkthrough this week, and then the DDC will be next week. Transportation, they're looking at offering Spectrum students school bus transportation instead of BC Transit passes. This is a request from the actual families in Thetis Vale, so we're looking into seeing if that's feasible. Network communication infrastructure and security team, the majority of them are actually at Vic High and will be until February 1st. They're working on the network control systems as well as the PA and the security systems. They did manage to finish Marigold Elementary, so it has a new fob system.
And for climate and energy, most of the lighting upgrades are now done. We've got a couple schools that are nearing completion. And then we've got the climate pledge wall is now being, rolled out to all the elementary schools. And then a few trustee questions were answered. One was the water charges and the other was about around our Butis Middle Shop not being operational and why. So any questions?
Well, I'm gonna, pull rank. Can you just clarify the spectrum transport charges? So these are students who are outside of the walking distance, and normally they would we would give them a bus pass, but because of service, we're now looking at other options instead. Could you speak to that? I don't know if I've summarized it, but could you speak to that one?
Yeah, you've summarized it. For the most part, most of our high school students would prefer a BC Transit Pass, so they can use it outside of school hours as well. We try to accommodate it. We try and accommodate as many students on the bus. I mean, elementary and middle school first, and then high school second, because we can't give them BC Transit passes. Parents in middle schools don't appreciate their kids being on BC Transit. In this case, we've got Thetis Vale, which is up near Thetis Lake. And there's a number of families that have actually requested if their high school students can actually ride the bus and not have to deal with BC Transit. My assumption, my kids actually, this is kind of the area I live in, and BC Transit is hard to take, honestly, around this area. So that might be part of it. So we're going to see if it's cost effective and if we can actually assist the parents. So more to come.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Welcome.
Trustee Kwan, did you have anything you wanted to jump in there?
You took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you.
I beat you to it. How unlike me. Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Vic High School seismic project update.
Yeah, so we actually had the pleasure of walking through Vic High with the City of Victoria last week. The building inspector was actually present. He's luckily going on a holiday for a couple of weeks. So he squished us in, which was kind. It was a really positive walkthrough. He'll be back again at the beginning of January. So we're still working on substantial completion for all the contractors, mechanical, electrical, paint, flooring, etc. It's coming along. The gym floor is installed now and the line should be painted this week. So the project is definitely progressing. Questions?
How are our finances looking?
Finances is looking pretty good. The overall budget, we still have a little bit of money remaining, but we're still unfortunately finding unforeseen, and we can't cut scope at this point. So we're doing things like we could lay sod down for about 100,000, or we could wait till the spring and put hydro seed. So we're waiting to the spring to put hydro seed, which is only 10,000. So little decisions like that we can make and kind of cut out of the budget, but so far we're good. Fingers crossed, Dr. Wood.
Fingers crossed, absolutely. Trustee Kwan.
Yes, I constantly have my fingers and toes crossed for you.
Appreciate
that. I also just wanted to ask, how we're doing in terms of timing and, whether we foresee any issues with being in at the end of January, as far as the occupancy permits and all of that kind of stuff goes, how long does that take, and whether we're ready to, whether we'll be ready on time to get that kind of thing. Wonder if you could speak to that.
Sure. So right now we're doing level by level. So there's weird counting. It's level 4 to level 0. Right now we've done occupancy completion on level 4 and level 3, and level 2 is to happen this week. It's supposed to happen Monday and is a little bit delayed. So that's part of the push through with the City of Victoria, where we walk through every single floor and they look outside, where the bike racks, right? They go through any deficiencies. So everything that we thought they'd tag, they've tagged, which is great because we're a little bit further ahead than the City of Victoria stated. They're a little the City of Victoria has stated we're a little further ahead than they thought we would be, because we've got the fire alarm verification already and we've got the elevators passed. So we're slowly chucking off things. There's still concerns that there's material still being delivered to site.
next week there'll be more deliveries to site. So there is concerns with material. There is concerns with the number of trades on site, trying to get them on site. So there's definitely concerns. There's a big push. Everybody on this project wants to leave the project. The biggest question right now is what the school will look like in the terms of, will the all the painting be done? Will we be painting, doing the final touch-ups when students are there? We'll be looking at baseboard installs when students are there. So we're really pushing for tech packages to be installed, and we'd like it to be so there's no contractors on site when students arrive, but right now we just don't know. It's too big of a project.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay, on to Cedar Hills School Seismic Project update.
Not much of a project update, to tell you the truth. We are still finalizing cost share agreement with Saanich. We've got the civil engineer just actually responded today, so hopefully we can get those wrapped up pretty soon. The excavation on the site's progressing. The reinforced concrete foundations are in progress, and the installing the rock anchors are still ongoing. The mechanical and electrical underground will be underway next month. So it's progressing nicely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions? I see none. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
We have no public disclosure of in-camera items tonight. New business. Notice of motions. General announcements. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Big surprise. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a busy but comprehensive meeting tonight.